He saw a giant rise from the shadows, its head touching the clouds, its face darker than night. And then a radiant man beside him said, "You must fight him, but do not fear. I will be with you." This was the first great vision of the young Francesco Forgione, the boy who would become Padre Pio, a mystical battle between light and darkness that revealed his divine mission. If you love stories about Padre Pio's hidden life, his visions, and his battles against the enemy, subscribe now and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next chapters in this incredible journey of faith. Before Padre Pio became the world-famous Capuchin friar, marked with the wounds of Christ, he was simply a young boy named Francesco Forgione, a boy who already spoke with angels, who slept on a stone pillow, who prayed alone in the attic of his humble home. But even this chosen soul faced fear, hesitation, and struggle before saying yes to God. This is the story of the 3 mystical visions that changed his life forever. By the time Francesco was 14, he already felt the divine call to become a friar. But his heart still clung to the world, not to pleasures or wealth, but to the warmth of his parents' home, the love of his mother, the company of his brothers. And so, before the day came for him to leave home, heaven granted him 3 visions, each revealing what his mission would truly mean. The first before Christmas, the second on New Year's Day, and the third on the eve of his departure for the monastery. In his letters, Padre Pio would later write that he revealed these visions only out of obedience to his spiritual director. He began his account with the words, "In nomine Jesu, Amen." He called it the first extraordinary call for this soul to abandon the world. One day, while meditating on his vocation, Francesco suddenly felt his senses leave him. He found himself in a vast open field. Beside him stood a man of majestic beauty, radiant like the sun, who said, "Come with me. You must fight like a brave warrior." They walked together until Francesco saw 2 great armies before him. On one side, shining men dressed in white. On the other, dark figures clothed in shadows. Then, between the 2 armies, appeared a terrifying giant, whose head touched the clouds and whose face was darker than night. The radiant guide turned to Francesco and said, "You must fight him." Fear seized the boy's soul. He begged to be spared. This enemy looked too powerful, too terrible. But his guide, who was Christ himself, said to him, "It is useless to resist. You must fight. Take courage, for I will be at your side. I will help you, and I will not allow him to harm you. If you win, I will crown you with glory." So the young Francesco entered the battle. It was fierce and terrifying. The enemy seemed unstoppable. But with the help of his guide, he triumphed. The monster fled howling into the darkness. Then Christ took from under his robe a crown of indescribable beauty. He placed it on Francesco's head, and then removed it, saying, "I will keep a more splendid crown for you if you continue to fight bravely. This enemy will return again and again, but do not fear. I will always be with you." At once, the field was filled with cries. The dark army fled in rage, and the white-robed host sang praises to the radiant guide who had helped the poor soul win such a bitter battle. That first vision was not only the beginning of Padre Pio's vocation, it was a symbol of the priesthood itself. Every priest, when he steps into the confessional or approaches the altar, enters the same battlefield. The priest's mission is to wrestle with the forces of hell for the salvation of souls. And like Like David against Goliath, he fights not by his own strength, but by the power of God. Today, however, this sense of battle has faded. Many modern theologians speak as if sin no longer exists, as if everyone is already saved, as if hell is empty. But if that were true, why did the martyrs shed their blood? Why did the apostles die for the faith? Why did missionaries cross oceans and face death to save souls? They did it because they knew what was at stake, and because they believed the words of Christ. Without me, you can do nothing. Padre Pio's vision reminds us, evil is real, but Christ is stronger. He stands as a living example given by heaven to remind us that the priesthood is not a mere office. It is a battlefield. His life reveals that every priest is called to stand between heaven and hell, fighting for the salvation of souls. When he celebrated Mass, when he heard confessions, when he prayed through sleepless nights, he was carrying invisible wounds of that same spiritual war. Through him, God shows us the immense weight and dignity of the priestly vocation. It is not a privilege of comfort, but a cross to be embraced with courage, purity, and sacrifice, for the glory of God and the salvation of mankind. A few days later, on January 1st, 1903, Francesco received another vision. He had already been accepted into the Capuchin Order and was preparing to leave home. While praying after communion, he was suddenly filled with a supernatural light. In that light, he understood the meaning of his first vision. The dark giant represented the devil, the enemy of every soul who dares to give itself entirely to God. The armies in white and black were the angels and demons watching the battle. He realized that entering the monastery was not an escape from the world, but an entrance into war, the spiritual war for souls. He felt peace in this revelation. Christ promised to be at his side. Therefore, there was nothing to fear. And Christ's promise can never be broken, nor can it ever be wrong. The night before his departure, January 5th, Francesco was still torn by sorrow. The thought of leaving his family made his body tremble and his heart ache. We often think that the saints are completely different from us, but this episode, Padre Pio's deep attachment to his family, shows that they faced the same human struggles we do. Deep down, the saints were ordinary people who simply accepted the divine will with extraordinary docility. But on that January 5th, he would have one more vision, a final encounter with Jesus and Mary. They appeared in majesty and tenderness, comforting him and assuring him of their love. Then Jesus placed his hand on the boy's head. At that touch, all fear vanished. Though his body still felt the pain of parting, his soul overflowed with peace and joy. At dawn, strengthened by this vision, Francesco Forgione left home and walked toward the monastery. It was January 6th, 1903, the feast of the Epiphany, when the young man who had fought the devil in a vision took his first step toward becoming Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. These three visions were not only mystical favors, they were a map for his whole life: the battle against evil, the light of divine guidance, and the consolation of Christ and his mother. These would mark every step of Padre Pio's journey. And just as Jesus told him that night, "Do not fear, I am with you," those same words are meant for us. In every struggle, in every temptation, and in every dark night of the soul, Christ fights beside us. All these accounts can be found in Padre Pio of Pietrelcina, Epistolary the Hen, Correspondence with his spiritual directors, 1910 to 1922, a treasure where we can read the intimate dialogue between a saint and his guides, and see how heaven shaped every step of his vocation. If you want to keep discovering the hidden life, the letters, and the mystical experiences of Padre Pio, subscribe now and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the next stories.